Hi everyone. It's great to see you all out for the latest in our instalment of Up Close and Personal classic album discussions. We've had some great conversations already this week, and tonight we're going to be discussing another classic album. This particular album, Tired and Emotional by Mary Coughlan, was Mary's debut. It was recorded in Headford in Galway and released in 1985, and I think heralded the arrival of a brilliant and charismatic singer, and someone who's really been, I think, a beloved part of the Irish cultural landscape ever since. In terms of the mood and the style of this album, it's quite a late night nocturnal album, I would say. Which may owe something to the fact that I think quite a lot of the vocals were recorded late at night, which I've no doubt we'll discuss. It's quite a melancholic album in parts. It's celebratory in others, but I think throughout it all, Mary's vocals are just really captivating and hypnotic. And I think as a whole, the album is a great showcase for her abilities as a performer and her range as a singer. So all of that and more is going to be up for discussion in this deep dive about the album. Just one other thing to say about it is it was a huge hit commercially. Mary at one point made an appearance on The Late Late Show at the time, performing a song from it, and I think that really pushed the album on to greater things. And it was really just one of the biggest and one of the defining Irish albums of the era. So all that and more is going to be up for discussion tonight. And to talk about it, we have the extraordinary woman who was responsible for the album and the reason we're all here. Please welcome the brilliant Mary Coughlan.
How's it going? I have a funny microphone in my pocket, okay, so
do I. That makes
this is the
this is the album.
This is the album. Yeah, we'll put it here.
It's a great cover.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fucking leave my masks there, okay? These are my notes. I don't have any.
Mary, reading about this album, which of course was your debut, one thing that struck me was that for someone releasing their debut record, I mean, you're quite a bit older than most people are when they put out their first album. Leonard Cohen actually did something similar, but did you ever, were you someone who was striving for a career in music? Or was
no.
No?
I was very happily engaged in breastfeeding and natural childbirth. I had 3 small children, and I was running a whole food co-op in Galway. I was knitting hats and selling them on the street on Saturday. I had breastfeeding classes in my house on Tuesday nights. And I wrote a column for a magazine, hippie magazine called Into the West, about natural child rearing and natural childbirth. And I was, an old hippie living in Galway. And, I met a guy one night called Eric Visser.
Mm-hmm. Central to this album.
Central to most of my life, and we were in a pub in Salthill called the Continental. The cottage bar was the Continental Hotel. It was run by an American guy called Brian Mooney, and there were sessions there every night of the week. And sometimes I'd sing a song, usually an old Irish song or some sean-nós or something. And I saw Eric there one night, and he heard me, and he moved into the house that I was living in the next day.
Wow, what a connection.
So he moved in, I should say, with myself and my then husband, and we shared a house. Patsy McGarry from the Irish Times.
Oh yeah.
Patsy was living there, so we had a house in Salthill. And
this is like a sitcom.
It's like
Patsy McGarry, you, Eric Visser.
Yeah. So, and there was a girl from Waterford called Maureen. Anyways, we had such good fun there. And Eric knew I could sing, and he had I didn't know anything. We didn't know anything about him, but he was a rather famous musician from Holland, just in Ireland for a little while. And he moved in with us, and we found out over the course of a few months that he was actually very well known, and he would go away on tours that lasted, but took him to Japan, South America, and every place. And when he came back from one of those tours, I was pregnant and I was knocked down as I was crossing the street. I was 6 months pregnant. And he used to come to the hospital every day and play the guitar.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And when Aoife, my daughter, was born, he wrote a tune and it was called Aoife, and it was #1 in Holland, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and Luxembourg,
Really?
and yeah,
Wow.
everywhere. So, and then he went away for 2 years, and then he came back and he said, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
So he said, now we'll do an album together.
Yeah. And how did you feel when he said that? Were you excited or apprehensive, or you know?
I just couldn't believe it, you
Really,
know. I mean,
yeah.
I'd seen him play, and I mean, you know, I was a young mother and I had 3 children, and it wasn't on the horizon in any way at all, you know, but the prospect was very exciting.
Yeah.
And my mother looked after the kids while we rehearsed, and we went out to, you mentioned Headford, out to Greenfield Studios, and Gerald used to work in the bank. So we couldn't start recording any evening until after the bank closed. I worked in the Allied Irish Bank in Headford. So that was kind of funny. So we did work at night, yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about a studio. I didn't know what headphones were. And he asked me once, how are your cans? And I told him to mind his own business. I think I was breastfeeding my son at the time. And he said, how are your cans? And he was talking about the headphones. And I didn't know. So that's how green I was, you know.
How did you go about assembling the songs for the album? I mean, did you know, he wrote, you know, he co-wrote
Eric
quite a
wrote,
bit of it,
yeah. Well, my first ex-husband, Fintan, wrote the Double Cross, and that was kind of his parting gift to me, was this song, which I didn't really understand fully the significance of it until years later. I mean, it was the song, it was the first #1 I had in Ireland, and but it is a very beautiful song.
Yeah.
You know.
It has quite a haunting sort of country
Yeah,
feel
and
to it.
everybody loves it still, you know.
Yeah.
The beach came about because Bishop of Galway had banned 2-piece swimming costumes on women. I mean,
Only on women, I know.
Yeah, only on women. He didn't care what boys were. Dr. Michael Brown, and I was telling Eric a funny story about an incident that happened with stolen bikinis in Galway, and he wrote that song about it, you know.
Yeah.
Swimming without your knickers on. So.
But Double Cross, you mentioned, there's a great line in it, like my coffee, I've grown cold. But I think you're going to perform this song now, aren't you? Double Cross. Yeah. Do you want to? Will we do it now?
We do that, Jolly.
Opening
It's
track.
Johnny Taylor over here.
Opening track on Tired and Emotional.
How's it going, everyone? So here we go. This is Johnny Taylor.
Hi, Johnny. Oh, Johnny.
I wake up in the morning, I get out of bed and drag my makeup on. I walk out on the streets, my every exit covered. I hitch up my pants, I'll fake it just like a man. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. I'm lost without the double cross of you. Like my coffee, I've grown cold. I stay behind and fade into the wall. I'm lost amongst the jostling crowds at lunchtime. I'm hoping you'll come, I know that you won't even call. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. I'm lost without the double cross of you. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. I'm lost without the double cross of you. My social smile comes out again, my glass in hand, have a word for one and all. But deep inside I'm crying like a baby. I'm all grown up, I never learned how to crawl. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. I'm lost without the double cross of you. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. I'm lost without the double cross of you. Every hold I had on time, every dream I thought was mine, it's all quite forgotten now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There's a line in that I always forget, or it's I fake it just like a man. It's because it was a reference to when I went to London first when I was 18. I got a job I was the first female street sweeper in London. So just pull on my makeup, pick up the pants, and fake it just like a man. So it's kind of it's kind of a funny kind of little thing.
I mean, you'd spent time in London, obviously, before coming back and making this album. I mean, were you immersed in music during that time, or what were your sort of formative musical? What was the stuff you loved during that?
Oh, Radio Luxembourg, really, and Radio Caroline. I had a little transistor. My mother was very fond of Cliff Richard and Guy Mitchell. And my father liked Bridie Gallagher, so we had a record player. And my mother's two younger brothers, one of them was an Elvis fan, and he used to cycle to a fan club every second Tuesday in the month.
Oh, really? Yeah.
In Galway, and they used to have a box of singles, and they used to go and play them. And his brother Ken was a Beatles fan. Mm-hmm. So we listened over and over to Rubber Soul and queued up all night outside Raftery's in Galway to get Sgt. Pepper.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And it was hard to come by records. Mm-hmm. And when we did get a record that we liked, we used to do swapsies on the street, Mm-hmm. And we'd go to people's houses and listen to records, and write the words down. I had bringing it all back home from Bob Dylan, and we used to literally have copybooks and write the words. It was hugely important music.
Yeah.
Growing up,
Yeah. It's funny, listening to the album, I felt like there's quite a strong jazz influence on it, I think. There's that kind of atmosphere. I mean, is that a style of music you liked?
I didn't know anything about. I didn't know anything about jazz. I had a record. I had at that stage. I had Billie Holiday records when I was living in London. I went to see Lady Sings the Blues. Diana Ross was playing Billie Holiday in Shepherd's Bush one Saturday afternoon, and I went down Portobello Road on Sunday to the record shops and stalls, and I bought a copy of Lady in Satin, which I still have. And I was looking through my albums this evening. There's a few Billie albums there and a Bessie Smith, and so I did listen. I had never heard of her before that movie. It just wasn't on my radar. I knew Frank Sinatra, and I listened to everybody, Manfred Mann, I mean, Procol Harum. I painted the triangle from the dark side of the moon on my bedroom wall, and my father made me take it off when he came home from work. I spent the whole day painting the thing, and so that was the music I listened to, the Moody Blues. That's the stuff that was on the radio.
In terms of the feel of this album, were you directing it, or were you sort of taking direction as to how
it was an experiment.
Yeah.
All we had was Meet Me Where They Play the Blues.
Oh yeah.
Which was on an old 78 that I had by. Actually, Gerard had it. Gerard Coffey, a friend of mine. He and I had a record player, so I really liked it. Jack Teagarden, and we had the Double Cross. Eric had written The Beach. And we didn't really have anything else. And I wanted to do a Billie Holiday song, and he said, well, let's change it up a little bit. So he kind of made this kind of a tango feel to it.
Oh, yeah.
Just to make it different, Yeah. So it then started to become something different. We didn't have a double bass, and we didn't know any saxophone players in Galway, but I knew Keith Donald from Moving Hearts.
Yes, yeah.
And then we asked him to come down and do it, so he did that. So that it started kind of going that direction, kind of by accident,
Yeah.
I mean, Johnny Ringo McDonough from Jadanan played drums and bones on it and percussion. We didn't have any drums. He actually played an upturned waste paper basket with some brushes. He played the bones and he played the baron. We didn't have a drummer with the kit,
That song you mentioned, Meet Me Where They Play the Blues, I believe is a New Orleans jazz standard from the 40s. So who brought that into the equation? Was it you who did that song? Or?
I can't remember which of us found it in an attic. Gerard Coffey and his wife Wendy shared another house that we lived in later on, and we found some records in the attic. And there were 78s, the ones that were made from Bakelite.
Yes.
And we found it. I think I still have it. I think I still have some of those records at home, boxes of carrying them around from various places I've lived in.
Yeah.
So it was an old, and it was real scratchy, and trying to get the words. I think I sang the words wrong, whatever.
Yeah. That particular track, we dug up an interview you'd done at the time for Hot Press, and it mentioned in it that I think that was a song you'd sent out to a few people, and maybe Gabe Byrne was someone who heard that song, and
Well, we sent it to Shea Healy, and Shea Healy was doing a thing called Sounds Promising.
Yes. Yeah.
So we sent up the Double Cross and Meet Me Where They Play the Blues, and he was playing it in the studio with Siobhan. I can't remember her name right this minute. She lives in Australia now. She presented the program with Shea, and Gabe Byrne was doing the radio program, and he was walking by the studio, and he said, "What's that?" And they said, "It's we just got a cassette from this woman in Galway. She's got 3 kids, and she's just she wants to sing." And he said, "Oh, could I have it, please?" And before the album came out, Gabe Byrne already had me on the Late Late Show, and we only had that song rehearsed, Meet Me Where They Play the Blues. And then he asked me to sing. He seemed genuinely really interested, and I didn't know anything about Gabe Byrne except that he was God, and all we ever did as children was watch the Late Late Show and eat crisps, or whatever. It was so my grandmother, who had never left Galway in her life, came to Dublin with my parents to see me on the Late Late Show. I know, yeah. So, and Gay said, "Do you have another song? We'd love to hear another one." And I said, I actually, we don't, and he said, "You must have something." So I sang Strange Fruit unaccompanied, and that was, I think that song more than anything else captured people's imagination, because I just sat beside him and sang it.
The Beach is actually the next song in sequence on the album, but we're gonna have that one later. But do you want to Meet Me Where They Play the Blues now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Woo! I got a heart that's broken hearted, how do I mend it? I gotta cry and jag you started, how do I end it? Well, honey, if you're gloomy, come around and do me. Meet me where they play the blues. People have said they've seen you dance in hideaway places. People have said you find romance in others' embraces. Well, honey, if you're gloomy, come around and do me. Meet me where they play the blues. Eyes that flirt with a tear, and come on round here, and misery loves company, they say. So I linger till dawn while the saxophone wails on, and I'm hoping you'll happen this way. I'm sick and tired of sipping wine and watching the bubbles. How did our dreams fall out of line and land us in trouble? Well, honey, if you're gloomy, come around and do me. Meet me where they play the blues. Eyes that flirt with a tear, and come on round here, and misery loves company, they say. So I linger till dawn while the saxophone wails on, and I'm hoping you'll happen this way. I'm sick and tired of sipping wine and watching the bubbles. How did our dreams fall out of line, land us in trouble? Well, honey, if you're dreamy, come around and see me. Meet me where they play. I want you where they play. Meet me where they play
brilliant. I think you can definitely hear why that song was so popular with people. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and I was just singing it there, and you know, you're probably right. Like there was nobody in Ireland singing songs like that
I don't
at
think
the
so.
time.
No.
There was a lot of trad around.
Yeah.
There was a lot of folk, great folk around, but and there was loads of bands around, but there was nobody kind of doing anything like that, really.
Yeah. You know, reading that interview as well, there's an interesting little anecdote in it that I think at one point you may have played in a competition for different artists. And did you finish second in this competition? And you received the trophy on stage, and you're so disgusted at finished second, you smashed
broke
it.
Yeah.
Which I think fair play to you for. Yeah. So
we entered a talent competition just for the crack. Myself and Eric and a bass player called Peach Boutenhouse. He was another Dutch. He was a bass player. He lived in Galway, and we had to go and do 3 songs every night. It was like in a place in Salt Hill, and we had to go and do 3 songs every night. And every night we won the popular vote, and all our friends and families were dragged out to vote for us, and it was really great fun, you know. I bought this is a really funny story. I bought a dress in a boutique in Galway for the first night, and it was this gigantic blue and white striped dress, which looked like a circus tent, all over the place, big flared thing, you know. And Eric said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's my dress for the gig." And he says, "We're going to play in a nightclub, Mary." And I've just been like hanging around the house with the kids, and I was so mortified. And he sent down the road for my friend Frida. He said, "Do you have anything black?" And Frida came up with a lovely black dress, and she put it on, and it's been I've been living in black ever since. And then he said, "We need to," because he was used to working with people on television. I said, "We need to make this with some black stuff under here. Can you do that, Frida, so that people will see her eyes from the back of the room?" So like it was like I didn't know what was. Okay, I'll just do it, you know. And I loved it. I just took to it like a duck to water. I used to look forward to those Wednesday nights. Mm-hmm. And we didn't win. And we had original songs every night. Yeah. We did the entire album before it was even recorded.
Oh wow!
And some girl won it, and she was singing "Silver Threads and Golden Needles."
Yeah.
And it transpired that she was engaged to the guy who owned the club.
Typical.
And they were going on honeymoon to New York. And the prize was for a holiday for 2 in America.
Yeah.
Weekend, yeah. So like, I threw my trophy down and stormed out of the place.
Well, I think you had the last laugh, it's fair to say.
Anyway.
Was it a happy time making this album?
It was very confusing for me because I was really, really happy to be doing it. I was leaving my kids with my parents every evening. I was separated at that stage from my husband because he was a school teacher, and he didn't like me singing. He didn't approve of it, and I mean, so we're talking about 1984, 1985 in Galway, and it seems strange now for people to think about. We didn't have family planning. I worked in the family planning clinic as well in the late 70s and giving out information to people about contraception, and it was just kind of all the wrong things I was doing for a school teacher's wife, you know. and I was quickly I was going in this direction. So I just said, fuck it, you know, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. So I was doing the album every evening, and we were doing the singing competition on the Wednesday night. I was doing 2 songs in the Cellar Bar with a jazz band on Sunday morning as well, and Wednesday night, and that was really getting into it. You know, I was finding my voice.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was I was 24. I was 29 when the album came, but I started, I suppose, when I was 26. You know, I remember Owen, he was my baby, and my son. I had 3 children when I was 26.
Yeah.
So I was finding my voice in more ways than one. So he left He left under duress. He gave us the song and said good luck, you know.
Yeah.
And he went on to be the vice principal in the school. And I later moved to Dublin. I said, I want to do this for the rest of my life now. And I put the 3 kids in the back of the car once and drove to Dublin and found a house and paid rent. I'd been involved in a crash, and I got money from one of those, my mother called it blood money. And I got £10,000. I bought a car and I paid rent for a house in Dublin for 2 years in advance. And I said, well, if I don't get a gig or if nothing happens, at least I have enough money in 1985 to live on for a while, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of old enough to remember actually the 80s. I mean, it was talk about a totally different time in Ireland. It's, you know, I mean, it's sort of day and night, isn't it, in comparison to where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it a lot. You think about it when this was coming up. Like, I mean, it was extraordinary times. Things were beginning to change for women, big time. You know, things were beginning to change. People were talking about divorce, abortion, family planning. After the first album came out, I became quite politicized and hanging around with like Mary Robinson and Ivana Bacik and all those people, and our good friend Nell McCafferty, and Margaret Darcy was a huge influence in my life in Galway when I was a teenager, and I suppose I was radicalised a little bit, you know, and they would call it radicalised. It was just coming into the 20th century, really.
Yeah,
Ireland was
about
coming
time,
into the 20th century, dragged screaming, and
exactly,
I remember that Ivana Bacik and some women in the universities started to give out information about family planning in the clinic in the universities. They were putting numbers on the bathroom doors in Trinity and UCD and in Galway, and they were arrested and charged with I don't know, doing something illegal and criminal activity, and they were in court in the Four Courts in 1987. And I lay down on the street outside the Four Courts and stopped the traffic. Nell McCafferty was there, gave me a microphone, one of those megaphones, and I sang, I want to be seduced, for about 4 hours until the court case was over, you know.
The next song on this album is Delaney's Back on the Wine. What can you tell us about this particular song?
Delaney's Gone Back on the Wine. Okay, Mickey Finn was a guy living in Galway. He was a great fiddle player. And he had a band called Dickler Fitz. And Mickey, unfortunately, died on Good Friday in 1987 at the age of 33. And Johnny Mulhern wrote this song about him. And the people that are mentioned in the songs, we changed their names, but they all died within a very short space of each other. It was a big drinking town.
Yeah.
And people got paid instead of getting actual money in Galway for singing and playing music, you got paid in pints.
Yeah.
And that was the culture. And people, Mickey, unfortunately, 33, was a bit young.
Yeah. So I think why don't we take a couple of songs back to back, and then we'll talk Sense of Silence is the following song after. We'll talk a bit about that. This is Delaney's Gone Back on the Wine, followed by Sense of Silence. Sense of Silence. It's great. Huh. That's it. It's quite an unusual piece of music, that, isn't it?
Yeah. God, listen back to that stuff. It's just bringing back so many memories.
Really, yeah.
Just days spent rehearsing. And I mean, Eric is not well nowadays. I miss him terribly, you know. Probably don't think there's a day goes by I don't think about him at some stage during the day. And Sense of Silence was a song that he'd been writing for years. And he wanted me to sing it, and I didn't think I was able to sing it, and I spent quite a long time trying to get it right, you know. But it appealed to me because it had it had just there was something in it that was really, really lonely that I just really wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it well, you know.
Yeah.
I loved that song. I loved performing it afterwards when I started to do gigs.
Is that your favorite song on the album, would you say? Or?
I don't know if I have a fair. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite powerful. I mean, the different approaches vocally you had to take on the album, I mean, how did you deal with that? Like, as someone who, as you say, hadn't made a record before, a full-length record, I mean, you must have been getting quite a lot thrown at you in terms of making the album.
Yeah, I mean, we would just sit for hours mostly in my house or out in his house. I mean, I would put the kids in the car and they would go and play with Eric's kids, and him and I would sit in a room and just do it until I got it right, basically. You know, we recorded on analog. There was none of that auto tuning or anything. So everything I had holes in my t-shirts from, you know, doing things like that. Trying to I recall that in the studio being very worried that I wouldn't be able to do it right, because if you didn't do it right, we just had to do it again. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did an okay job, you know.
No, you did a marvelous job. It was incredibly well received album as well. I mean, were you surprised by how well it did? Or, you know?
Look, I moved to Dublin, as I said, and we made some cassettes. We got some cassettes manufactured. I don't know how, and Eric went back to Holland. He was doing a tour, and I went to loads of people that I had. Ollie Jennings was arts, ran a place called Smoky Joe's Cafe in UCG, and he gave me Dennis Desmond's name and address, and I would go to all these people and leave them a cassette with a note, and I drove out to Glasnevin, to Warner Brothers, to WEA, which was called then WEA, in Glasnevin, and met a guy there called Clive Hudson, and I left him the cassette, and he said, "This is really not our thing, you know. We were doing Donal at the moment and stuff like that." He said, "But I think I have, you know, I'll play it around for a few friends." And I went back home, and I got a phone call a few days later, and he said, "We'd like to come out and see you, and maybe do some sort of a distribution deal for you, you know." And I got very excited, you know, because I couldn't believe this was going to happen, that we were going to get a record, maybe. So basically, Eric paid for the album and for all of the recording in Greenfield Studios. I had a boyfriend at the time. His name was Frank Miller. He worked for the press. He took the photograph. He took the photographs of all the albums and the new one as well. Actually, he came out to do Life Stories.
Yeah. There's also sort of ransom note style, Sex Pistols style.
Yeah, down there, yeah. Joe Baskett did that. He was a German artist living in Galway. He's brilliant.
Was that his idea or your idea?
That was his idea.
Yeah, it looks very cool actually. Yeah.
So yeah, I forget what I was saying. So yeah,
we were talking about
so they came out to my house. Jackie Hayden actually came out with Clive, and they offered me this deal, which is on one piece of paper, and you know, we didn't have any better offer, so we gave them the album for nothing, and we gave them the artwork. And the first gig, when the album was coming out, Frank Miller and I, he got posters made. Frank did, and we used to go around sellotaping them to the telegraph poles all around Dublin at night, which was kind of, I mean, that was it. That was as much as the publicity we were getting, you know.
Yeah.
And then Mark Cagney played it on the radio all night.
Yeah.
He played the whole side of the album.
One side of the album?
One side of the album. And he said...
How do you manage that?
He was doing that midnight, Mark Cagney after midnight, and then Mike Maloney played the other side.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was in December 1985, and it was number one in 1986 in January.
Great. And I mean, we went out to perform the album. What were the gigs like around that time?
There were 4 people at the first gig, and The second,
4 people at it.
4 people at the gig, so we
Yeah.
didn't do it. We just sat around the bar and did a few tunes. It was in the Harcourt Hotel. Keith Donald was playing, and Matt Kelligan was playing drums. Owen, all of Moving Hearts were in my band.
Really?
Yeah, the whole of Moving Hearts were in the band.
Yeah.
And there was 4 people at the gig. So we just went upstairs to the bar and we did a few tunes. Then they played the album that week. And I think the queue started at about 5 o'clock outside the venue, and they left in 350 people.
Yeah.
And then I was doing 3 gigs a week in Dublin
Yeah.
every week at that stage. And then I started getting offers of other gigs. And then Dennis Desmond called as well at that stage.
Yeah.
And he wanted to manage me, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, how did, like, in terms of where you fit in the industry here at that time, like you're saying, it's quite a distinctive, unusual album for the time in Ireland. I mean, like, did you feel sort of out of place to some extent, or, you know, did it take
Yeah,
a while
it wasn't mainstream, and
Yeah.
you know, Christie was huge,
Yeah,
Mary Black was huge, you know. I think Freddie White was. I did support for Freddie White in the Olympia, and at that time, which was, you know, so I was moving from the Baskett Inn and the Harcourt into the Olympia, you know, and within 3 months I was doing 7 nights at the Olympia. You know, there was like, it was just really, people were just going mad for it.
Yeah, yeah,
I couldn't understand it.
yeah,
I don't think anybody could.
yeah,
Like, so you come from Galway and then I'm doing, you know, the Opera House in Cork for 3 nights. I did in 1 year I did the National Concert Hall for a week, the Olympia for a week, the Gaiety for a week, Cork Opera House for 3 nights. I was doing a phenomenal business in London. I was playing the Mean Fiddler for 7 nights a week. I was doing Sadler's Wells. I was doing the Dominion in Tottenham Court Road. I played 7 nights in Ronnie Scott's in 1986.
yeah.
And it was just like, there were so many different types of people who would go to different places to listen. It was just all crazy, you know.
Yeah.
It was,
Well, I mean, to do 7 nights at the Olympia, I mean, that gives some indication of, like, it's a proper cultural phenomenon, really, when you're doing that, you know.
yeah,
that
but it was brilliant. And we brought in the Dice Man.
Oh, really?
Again, Eric would be very, I suppose he was very kind of ahead of his time and a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. The Dice Man, Tom McGinty.
Yes, yeah,
We brought Tom in to do a lot of mime stuff, you know.
yeah,
And there was a young dancer, I can't remember his name, Roy was his name. He danced with this woman called Zelda, and they did the beach very provocatively
Oh, really?
at the side of the stage while I was singing. So we had all these little theatrical things that we were doing, you know,
yeah.
which were quite unique at the time, and people just loved it, you know.
Yeah. Well, speaking of idiosyncratic touches, I mean, the next track is Nobody's Business, which I think has a little tango flourish on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Nobody's Business.
Yeah, but so what can you tell us about this particular track and the tango influence on it? Where did that come from?
Well, yeah, it was a song that Billie Holiday, I had heard her singing,
Oh, yeah.
and Peter Boughtonhouse was the bass player, and he used to put the bass down, and he and I did a tango in the middle of it when we started off.
Really?
And so when we that's when we were doing the talent competition. So it just became a fun thing to do. So there was, yes, a tango
Yeah.
thrown in at the end of it.
Did you have interpretive dance for the tango during
No,
the
we
game?
didn't. No.
What a shame. Let's take this song. This is Nobody's Business.
You.
That one must have gone down to Storm Live, I'd say.
Oh God, we had great fun with that song. Yeah, I changed all the words. That Billie Holiday used to say, "I'd rather my man would hit me," and I would say, "I'd rather my man would quit me." And there was a lot of, and it became the Divorce Action Group's anthem.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we used to "May divorce be with you" at the end of every gig. And ain't nobody's business. But it was huge, that song. For me, it was huge, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you choose to make the album in Headford? Was it because it was sort of...
There was no other studio.
That's always the best reason.
And I have a bass player now, Barry Donahue. He's from Athenry, and Gerald Donoghue is his uncle. So Barry had been aware of, Barry's only, what age is Barry, 30 something? 34. His uncle Gerald had been telling him about the making of the album long before he met me, which is kind of a strange coincidence. But there was no other record, there was no other studio in Galway. There were very few. Carl Hessian had a piano. He taught music in the jazz. There was no double bass. There was a broken double bass in Galway. There was a snare drum on that, and there was a bass drum as well. I think it was Mike Belton. He played with the show band. He came in and did some drums. I'd forgotten about that until I listened back to some of that. But mostly it was Ringo McDonagh playing percussion. And the double bass was broken, and it hadn't had new strings for about 1,000 years. And when we were in the studio recording I Want to Be Seduced, Eric had to lie down. We met this great guy. He had sailed from America to Galway, and he played with a band called Jonathan Richmond and the Modern Lovers, which I absolutely adored.
Oh, wow.
And Greg Curly Kernan happened to hear us one night talking about making an album. Can I be part of your project? And we said, yes, sure. He said, you got a double bass? And we said, no, but we'll find one. So we got one, and so he was playing the double bass, and Eric was laying on the ground because there was a big crack in it and holding the sides of it together. The big belly of the double bass.
Wow.
While your man was playing the bass. It was hilarious,
So someone from Jonathan Richmond and the Modern Lovers sailed to Galway and happened to hear.
Well, he was in the Keys bar one night when we were chatting about the album. And he was just this great character, He was Greg Curly Kernan.
Yeah.
He came back to Dublin 2 years ago. I met him with his couple of his kids and stuff. Mm-hmm. He wanted to relive his time in Ireland, and we met up. It was a strange experience, because it just happened to be there, mm-hmm. and and he was like, Jonathan Richmond was huge,
Yeah.
I loved Jonathan Richmond, and there he was.
So it was obviously a great time for him as well that he came back to.
He couldn't believe that album. That he went into a record store in New York one day and it was there,
Oh, really? Yeah.
Years later. It was so weird.
I wonder, with the success of the album subsequently, did you get to meet, musical heroes, or did it sort of introduce you into a new realm of people?
Well, I suppose you know the answer to that already. The first gigs I did in the Opera House in Cork, Van Morrison was at 3 of them.
Really?
And three nights he came to the gig. But Richie Buckley was playing with him at the time, and Richie says, you got to come and hear this woman and I'm singing with, and he did. And then Elvis Costello started calling around for cups of tea, and it was just like, I remember one night in a dressing room in London, there was Nick Cave, Elvis Costello, Van Morrison, and Shane MacGowan in the dressing room.
Jesus, talk about an A-list lineup.
I know, it was like.
And they're all here to join it now.
But it was like kind of silly. I mean, I really didn't get it. Everyone was just partying all the time, and it was that's what it was.
How did you find Van Morrison? What was it like?
I had a Van Morrison album when I was very young, St. Dominic's Preview.
Oh yeah.
And I listened to it over and over and over and over and over again. Particularly a song called Listen to the Lion. Mm-hmm. And as far as I was concerned, he was probably the greatest songwriter and the greatest singer to ever come out of Ireland. I still think that. I know he's a grumpy old bastard. But I mean, I just those early albums. I mean, he was incredible.
Yeah. I think stylistically, that's something this album is actually quite close to. It has kind of a Van Morrison sort of.
If I could sing like Van Morrison, I would. Like the way that he does that stuff that he does in Astral Weeks. I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah.
I would never touch. There's some people's songs that I might cover, like even Joy Division and stuff, but I would never cover a Van Morrison song. Yeah. Although we did one for his birthday, but that was different.
Yes, yeah. It's so interesting. Nick Cave was interested in the album as well. Was he a fan?
Yeah, and that guy, what was his name? He played with the Pogues for a while. He died.
I don't know.
Oh, he was incredible. He had band. He was a punk guy. Yeah, there was a lot of people that was interested.
Yeah.
Very early on, before. I remember doing the Tube, with
Oh,
Paulie
of course,
Ace
yeah.
and Jules Holland, and
Yeah.
I did the Jonathan Ross show. I was probably more well known abroad for a good many years, and toured abroad more than I did at home. I did a lot of stuff in Holland and Germany, Scandinavia.
Yeah.
A lot of television and a lot of gigging.
Yeah.
Crazy 10-week tours in tour buses,
Yeah.
like insane stuff, just getting out and doing a gig and getting back in the tour bus and going to sleep and drinking loads, and
Yeah.
it took its toll in the end,
So we're going to go a bit out of sequence now. You are going to do another song. You talked a bit about this song, "The Beach," earlier.
Oh, yeah.
There's quite a racy lyric to this one, I think. Is there? Or maybe there isn't.
Maybe there isn't. I don't know. He was walking.
Yeah.
As I said, it was about a story about, I told Eric about, and he wrote this little ditty about somebody watching you while you're having a swim without your clothes on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He stood, I guess it was, but it was the Bishop of Galway we were talking about. and little did we know that there was a bishop in the wings called Eamon Casey, who was doing a little more than watching women naked at that stage. So, so I suppose there was a little bit of that little thing going on in it, and I always told the story, so people would just laugh at it now, but in the beginning they were shocked.
Yeah. Eamon Casey's a whole other podcast, I think.
He is, yeah.
That's next week.
So,
let's have
here
The
we
Beach
go.
here. This is
yeah. You're all right. Okay. He was walking on the beach when I went down for a swim. I hadn't got my togs with me. I wanted to strip off and go in. I knew he knew what I wanted to do, but still he wouldn't go. He stood and watched the show. I was sitting at the bar, having had a lot to drink. I was talking to this guy, he'd only just come in, I think. And my head was spinning around, and when I tried to go, well, he stood and watched the show. I was sitting at the bar, I forget the words, having had a lot to drink. And I was talking to this guy, he'd only just come in, I think. And my head was spinning around, and when I tried to go, well, he stood and watched the show. He stood and watched the show. He stood and watched the show. Woo. Thank you. Thank you. sorry, I lost the words there because your man's name came into my mind. Joe Strummer turned up one
really?
night.
Oh, wow.
And your man from Soft Cell, he wrote...
Mark Almond.
Mark Almond, yeah.
Is there anyone who didn't turn up on this tour?
I had the most Zig Sputnik. Do you remember that band?
Can you believe this? Zig Sputnik?
Yeah.
Is there a photo of this?
I went to, this is the kind of crazy life I had briefly for a few years. I went to Brian May's 50th birthday party, and Elton John was there, and it was just like we were driving through London in like, this seems so stupid, but we had like limousines with, I remember waving out, drinking champagne, going to parties and stuff. It was like absolutely insanity.
So was Zig Sputnik at Elton's party?
They were, yeah. In all of their regalia, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember they used to wear those incredible costumes?
Yeah. Where was it, in Elton's house, or was it?
No, it was Brian May's birthday.
Oh, it was Brian May's birthday.
Yeah. Freddie was there, Freddie Mercury.
Did you talk to Freddie?
I did. There was it was. I actually was quite comfortable. Neil Jordan was with us. Neil was making a movie in London at the time. It was just like a big party town. Everybody knew everybody, and we went there. It was in Surrey, in this huge castle, like this mansion of a house, like.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Anyways, I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Back home on Monday morning,
Well, with the success of the album and, the experiences like you're talking, it sounds idyllic, the period after the album with, the way everything was going. It sounds like you're having a brilliant time.
Well, there was 3 albums in a really short space of time. There was that, and then that we toured constantly that year, and then we put out Ancient Rain and I'd Rather Go Blind, which was a 12-inch single, doubles, and Strange Fruit was on the back of it, and then straight away we did Under the Influence, which really kind of cemented the whole thing together, and that brought us to Europe big time, because they loved the whole style of that album. It was very kind of, I suppose cabaret wouldn't have been like, as in the sense of Brecht and Vile, That's what we were listening to at the time,
Was that something you picked up on later? Was that style of music, when you?
I say Eric would have introduced me to all that stuff, and I knew Agnes Barnell and Peter O'Brien, and Philip Chevron was playing with Agnes at the time. Father's Lying Dead on the Ironing Board. Do you remember that album? She had,
I don't.
And Father, the wardrobe is full of infantrymen. Agnes Barlow, came to live in London, and she was friends with a lot of people I knew in Dublin, and her father was a nightclub owner in Berlin in the 30s, and they had to leave when the war started, and they moved to London. But she had she collected hundreds of songs that people had written, Wedekind and Dress, and she translated them, and I sang them.
Yeah.
I just, oh God, I want to do this. I have to do this. And I was just so, it was just a whole other direction.
Yeah.
So I would say that there are no 2 albums the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been that was important to me, that it would not just be one thing after the other. They had to have a story and a style, and
Yeah. Before we just move on to discussing the next track, do you remember what you talked to Freddie Mercury about?
Nothing. He wasn't well, and
it was quite late then.
It was quite late, and but he was there, and we just like, you can't believe the people that were there. We were just flitting.
Yeah.
Flitting like butterflies.
Fantastic.
Drinking lots of exotic drinks, and whatever you have in yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So the next track is Mama Wants to Barrel House All Night Long. What a title for a song. What can you tell us about this track?
Bruce Coburn.
He's a Canadian songwriter, I believe.
Yeah, Bruce Coburn. He's. I met him a couple of years after that at a festival I was doing in Canada. And he said, "I'm pleased to meet you." He said, "I get the royalty checks, thanks very much." And I changed some of the words of the song, and he said, "I don't mind." He said, "It's fine." I was kind of nervous that he had actually even heard of it, and I said, "I did change the words," and he said, "It's okay. I collect the checks." That's just fine. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Gerard Coffey plays guitar a lot of the album, and Gerard was a good friend of mine, and he really wanted this song. It was one that we were doing live, around those little places in Galway and stuff.
Yeah.
We used to go to Ennis every Sunday morning to do a gig in the Market Bar.
Yeah.
And we got a fiver for it. In 1985, it was like a fiver each.
Yeah.
So much money.
Yeah.
I think you got like £7 on the dole at the time for the week, like we thought we were superstars.
Something I haven't mentioned, actually, it is quite an assemblage of musicians on the album, isn't it? It's,
There's, when you think, actually, people from different bands that were around at the time,
Yeah, yeah. And this is Mama Wants to Barrelhouse All Night Long. Beautiful, beautiful song.
Yeah, nice song.
Yeah. So was it a song of his that you heard, that songwriter Bruce Coburn, or?
Yeah. We lived in this house. We were all friends, and we had the co-op, and we used to meet in each other's houses still, even when we had kids, on the first Thursday of every month, and we'd listen to records. And I remember another guy that I brought in a Tom Waits album one, and we just sat around. I mean, we were just like. There was no music like that in Galway, so anything that anybody heard of that was unusual, we would share it with our friends. Mm-hmm. And it was a really precious thing to have an album and a record player, and you could, sit around, and we'd have dinner and a glass of wine, homemade wine. We used to make our own wine and beer, and listen to the album after dinner and talk about it.
Yeah.
We did the same thing with movies. There was a film club in Galway in Smoky Joe's Cafe once a month on Monday night, and we'd sit around and talk about the movies afterwards. We were nerds,
What were some of your favourites? What were your favourite movies?
Films, Caspar Hauser, The Enigma of Caspar Hauser.
Oh, yeah.
The Grand Bouffe, all those films. It was just like, Fellini, Amarcord, which is my favourite film of all time. We saw all those. Ollie Jennings brought all of those to Galway.
Yeah.
He was like a one-man cultural, ambassador, and brought all this music and film to Galway.
Yeah. So, it has, it's quite a culturally, it's a cosmopolitan city in that respect, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can hear it in the album, I think.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Lots of people living there from different countries that brought something to it,
Yeah, and people reacted to it, like you're saying, around the world as well. So, Country Fair Dance. This is the next song, which, as the title suggests, is a country song. Yeah. What do you remember of doing this one?
Jerry O'Byrne. He's a guitar player. He lived a long time in America. Jerry is back here now, I believe. Mm-hmm. He wrote this song, and he was very upset that I took the piss out of it in such a way, because we didn't record it straight, and I, said things that I wasn't supposed to say in it, and he was very upset. But he also took the royalty checks. But people used to go absolutely wiggy wild for this song.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I got into the whole, theatrics of it as well,
Yeah, because it has, with that country feel, there's actually, it describes a shootout in the
shootout. It's like a straight kind of a Rocky Raccoon, the thing, the Beatles,
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it reminded me of, except, but it was just a story of a thing that in his imagination, and we just went one step further with it,
Yeah.
And it was one of the songs that people loved to hear.
Brilliant. This is Country Fair Dance.
Okay.
The cowboy song.
The cowboy song. Woo!
What a cast of characters there are in that song.
Yeah.
What a night out that would be.
It was just all over the place, and the timing was all wrong, and me shouting 1, 2, 3, 4 in the middle of it, and there was a reference to True Grit, which was and Jerry didn't like that, and you know, like, come on, it was just the best crack ever, you know.
Yeah, you can hear it in the recording. Were there any songs that you wanted to do on the album and you decided not to do in the end, or, you know?
We had Ancient Rain at that time. Jimmy McCarthy had come up from Cork, and Jimmy played me a whole heap of songs, including No Frontiers and Mystic Lipstick, and a load of songs he'd written that other people subsequently made really famous. But I liked Ancient Rain, and we knew we recorded it around that time, but we kept it for as a single, because you couldn't fit that many songs on an album. You know, there were only so many minutes, you know. Plus, Dennis Desmond had the idea that it would be a great little number for Christmas.
Yeah.
So we weren't ready to do another album, but we had a couple of songs, you know. And it was huge. That Ancient Rain was like just, I don't know what it just caught the people's imagination again, you know.
Didn't you do Ride On at one point?
We did Ride On.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really extraordinary song, isn't it? I think
it is, yeah. A lot of people don't know what that song is about.
No, and I'm kind of fascinated by it, you know.
I met Jimmy, you know, around the time. I said, I know, Christy, like that campaign for Ride On was, you know, there was the black poster with the white horse. It was, I don't know if people remember it. It was, and then Ride On came under it, you know, and then it was Christy Moore, Ride On, new album. And I had come to know Jimmy a little bit, and I said, that song is not about riding horses, Jimmy. And from Ancient Rain, I knew the way that he used words and imagery, you know, and extraordinary songwriter. So the song is about political organisation. It's a very sad song about Ireland. The horse is the organisation with the Green Eyes Nationalist Party, with references to 1961, the horse standing 16-1 or 2, 19-1, 1921, 22. So there's loads of little things that he throws in there. Hands Light to the Touch, or bomb-making hands. And the song is about somebody who went to join the IRA, and the other person didn't, and he, you know, was left behind. And then when I knew that, then I knew I had to do it differently, you know, and make it, you know, a little bit angry and a little bit sad. And we got Davy Spillane in to do the pipes, and, you know, just like it was a whole different take on the song when I realised what it was about.
Wow, you
know.
Just decoded it. I'd never heard that explanation
there you go.
before. Yeah, I remember listening to it a few years back, and I think I was reading Cormac McCarthy at the time, and the two just, it's almost like Cormac McCarthy could have written the lyrics to that song. It's an amazing song. But we're getting towards the end of the album now, and the penultimate song is Lady in Green.
I don't know what that song is about. I know what it's about. It's about somebody that Eric knew who committed suicide. And that's what it's about. A lady who drowned, you know. I had very mixed feelings about singing it, but, you know, it's a very beautiful song. It's very, you know, and I don't think it was ever stated. I never said, you know, and I sang the song when I was doing gigs. But that's what it's about.
Yeah, it is a beautiful song.
Why would somebody give it up and die, you know?
Yeah, it is a beautiful song. This is Lady in Green. Lady in Green. Great, that's great. So before we get to the end tonight, there's a couple of things I just want to touch on. I mean, I mentioned the Late Late performance earlier, which I watched. It's on YouTube. I mean, that seemed to have quite a major effect on the. Well, it's credited with having a big effect on the album, and it ultimately selling 100,000 copies. Phenomenal total.
Nearly 1 million.
Really.
It sold almost 1 million copies. They still sell it. The Late Late Show, you know, it was part of. It was a huge part of my life growing up, and I think if you got on the Late Late Show in those days, it was very important. you could sell out a week at the Olympia if you got one appearance on the Late Late Show. I don't know if that would happen nowadays. It's still an important program, and people, watch it for, basically. But it was very relevant. It was very topical. Like Gay Byrne was never afraid of talking about, subjects that people didn't want to talk about. Lots of famous episodes. And but it was
at the time as well. Just when we only had a few channels.
We only
yeah.
So it was important. I was on the Late Late Show 13 times in the space. He was very, very fond of me, and I was very fond of him, and I lived beside him in Howth for a good many years, So I was always fond of him,
I was just talking to someone during the week and mentioned I was going to be doing this, and I mentioned that I'd seen an interview with you once where you were talking about Neil Jordan, who you'd mentioned earlier, and I said to my friend that you'd mentioned that Neil, he's cast you quite regularly in his films in different parts, and my friend said to me that he remembers you being in High Spirits.
Stop.
The comedy set in a castle in remote rural Ireland. It came out in 1988, which is a few years after this. But I looked up, I wasn't aware you were in that particular film, but I looked that up on YouTube as well. So you're playing a harp in a bar and sort of serenading
I'm playing
Steve
4
Gutenberg
different
and
parts.
Hannah. Yeah.
I'm playing 4 different. I'm a banshee. I played the harp and sing at night in the pub. I'm the housekeeper, and I was Peter O'Toole's mistress as well. I kissed Peter O'Toole. And they've just made a documentary about Peter O'Toole, and I had a very entertaining day looking at photographs recently and talking about. We spent 4.5 months making that film in Ireland and in Shepperton Studios. It was like, it was great.
Yeah, I remember watching it on video when I was a kid and loving it, really enjoying it. How did you meet Neil Jordan? What was your?
I met him at a party in out in Doon, the hill of Doon in Oughterard one night. Just around all of that time when I started singing, I probably sang, and he was aware of me anyway, certainly in the 80s. And I got a phone call to say that I want to be in a movie with Peter O'Toole, and I said okay. And Mick, I have Mick. Jesus, my head is gone. Miley.
Oh yeah, Mick Lally.
Mick Lally was Peter O'Toole's stand-in, and when I came to read for the part, it was up in the SFX in Dublin, and they had some cameras set up, and Neil was there, like that, and Mick Lally was there, and I knew Mick Lally from the Druid Theatre in Galway. And and we were pals, and I had to kiss Mick Lally and have this little exchange with him. And I said, how am I going to kiss Peter O'Toole? He said, when he sticks his tongue down your throat, Mary, you won't know it. he'll be grand. But it was just really fun. I'd never done anything like that in my life, I mean.
Yeah.
Everything was happening all at the same time, it was quite an experience.
So final thoughts on Tired and Emotional. What do you think of this album now when you look back on it?
I am surprised that I still get messages from people to say that they still listen to it. They listen to it on vinyl, and how much it touched their lives and changed the way they, looked at music, and it's been very kind to me. It meant that I could go to Australia, and I still do every couple of years, in New Zealand and all over the place, and do concerts. But I think I've done much better work now. I'm more confident. I know what I'm doing. I mean, I think The House of Ill Repute was one of the finest albums I've ever done. In 2007, and then I wrote an album with Eric when he got Parkinson's first. We did it in my house, Scars on the Calendar, which was basically about my life. We wrote it in the house and recorded it in my house because he couldn't work in a studio because he was getting quite bad. But he played all the guitars on it. It took a long time, and then Sentimental Killer. I mean, all the albums were. They're incredible. They're stories that that were like really important to us, you know. And I've only worked with 2 other people other than him, you know. Greg Cohen, he worked with Tom Waits and Randy Newman. I did a kind of a jazz album with him called The Long Honeymoon. And I worked with Pete Glenister recently now on Life Stories, and with the big album I did for Warner's called Uncertain Pleasures, when we had the big hits, you know, the big MTV hits, Invisible and Man of the World and all that. So, but yeah, Eric was very, very important in my life, and I probably wouldn't have started singing if it wasn't for his encouragement, and I certainly wouldn't have explored the music that I did explore if he hadn't put it into my hands and listened to this, you know.
Yeah.
And listen to this and tell me what you think of it, and do you think you could do something like this, or do you think you wanted to do something? I mean, like, he introduced me to Brel and everybody, you know. So, yeah, he enriched my life incredibly. Tired and Emotional did for a 29-year-old housewife from Galway with 3 children, did incredible stuff, a life beyond my wildest dreams, you know, and all the way back down again, and all the way back up again, and everything in between. But that was it, you know.
You're going to do Seduced, which is the final song. Who wrote the song? It's the one.
Jerry Tigerman. He's an American guy. We still write to each other. He sends me songs from time to time, but nothing really came up to this one. He wrote "I Want to Be Seduced," and he played it. I forget. It was a tuba. It was on a tuba. It was he played and sang, and Leon Redbone sang it, and Jerry wrote it, and we decided, well, we didn't have a tuba, but we had the broken double bass, so we did it with the double bass, and people still sing it. And still ask me to sing it. I still sing it. It's hilarious, and people tell me stories about how they, you know, met people while they were singing it to them. And you know, I remember on Grafton Street one day, a young woman came up to me and said, "Can I just thank you for that song called I Want to Be Seduced? My mom irons while she's singing it, and my dad listens to her singing it." And I can imagine what goes on afterwards, you know. It makes Daddy very happy to hear Mammy singing I Want to Be Seduced while she's ironing. A young girl came up on Grafton Street to me and said that one day. I'll never forget it. It's like the strangest thing that, like, you know, other people tell me they stand on tables and sing it at parties, you know. But that young girl was just up outside, like, Brown Thomas's. I was just, like, walking around, and I mean, what the hell, you know.
So
the ultimate compliment.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to close with this. Tonight was produced by Hot Press in association with Aidan Shortall of Up Close and Personal Promotions, and supported by the Department of Tourism and Culture. I want to thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoyed the evening. Yeah. Thanks everyone. I'm Paul Nolan from Hot Press, and we're going to close now with the brilliant Mary Coughlan doing Seduced.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say thanks to Johnny Taylor for sitting here and listening to all of that, and for your support over the years. And it's always great to come out and sing. So sorry, Johnny. I want to be seduced. I want a man to take me out to dinner. I'd like to see his eyes get moody, a thinking about the thought of what flirting's gonna do. I want him to be real cool. I want him to think about getting me right into bed. Have a chat about wearing condoms. Don't flutter my heartstrings. That won't fit me, he said. I might demur politely, but very slightly, if he tried to fondle my knee. But I'm relatively certain I'd compromise if I know me. I want to be seduced. I want a man to talk to me suggestively. I'd like to hear him say he'll be with me tomorrow morning, drinking hot jasmine tea. I want him to make me laugh. I want him to make a point of touching me when we talk, leaving all the jealous boys at the bar to mumble in their beer and gawk. You know it only happens when I'm napping, nodding in reverie. But I wouldn't mind a man who wouldn't mind seducing right from the minute that we'd been introduced. I wouldn't mind a man who wouldn't mind seducing me. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, sir. Okay, we're done. Thank you. You can go home now.